Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start, so anyone who wants to listen in, you can take a seat. So, hello, good morning. My name is Ophir Zilbiger. I'm the CEO of a consulting firm called Sekos out of Tel Aviv, Israel. Thank you for having me in your conference. It's a very impressive conference. What I'm going to try to achieve this morning is to talk with you about how cyber defense is achieved in an organization. Now, it's a tricky concept, and in order to do so, I'm going to talk about what cyber defense is and how it's different from information security, and lastly, I'm going to touch the implications of the implementation of cyber defense within an organization. I'm going to do that using a reference. The reference is a world first regulation for cyber defense published by the Israeli Central Bank. It was published in March of 2015, and the Israeli banks spent the better half of this year implementing it. And we've been working with the regulator and then with the banks. So I'm going to share some of our experience with you. So, a little bit about myself. I've been doing IT for many years, security specifically from '95. I joined PwC. I was a global network security SME, and then I managed the information security GRC practice in Israel. And I've been doing Sekos since 2003, founded the company and managed it. Within ISACA, I'm part of the council committee of the Israeli chapter. It's a smaller chapter than here, but still quite active. And I had the cyber subcommittee, which is a group of ISACA members and non-members dealing with cybersecurity and providing some insight to the Israeli industry and globally. So, my agenda is to cover the difference, once again, between cybersecurity or cyber defense. These are two terms that are interchangeable, but I do insist on focusing on cyber defense or calling it cyber defense to make a difference. But the difference between cybersecurity and information security, I'm going to talk about this directive, Regulation 361, the challenges of implementing it, and some conclusions. So, in the beginning, many people, it's a day-to-day discussion talking about the difference between information security and cybersecurity. And some people, like I had a chat with one of my colleagues last night, they call it marketing. There was a guy from Gartner, I can't remember the name now, who said cybersecurity is nothing but a hype. So, is there a difference between cybersecurity and information security? Maybe it's not so important to look at the difference, but really to understand where we are as opposed to where we were 5 years ago. And we can call that in cybersecurity if we want to or not. So looking at the differences between these two, the trivial part is looking at 2001 hackers versus today's hackers. Their motivation, what they're able to achieve. These are very easy to understand. We all accept that, and I guess the thing that is different in that term is whether that affects an organization's security, because organizational security is all about protecting information, and country-level security is protecting our critical assets, critical infrastructure, protecting our digital borders. So there is a difference today in a state level point of view. My colleague before me talked about cyber terror. So from a state level there's a difference, but from an organizational level I still wasn't persuaded. I took ISO 27001, which I guess we can all agree is a very robust information security controls framework. So I looked at that, and I chose some controls. I put them on a plane. We can call that the information security plane. And I said, okay, so cybersecurity must have a controls plane of its own. Let's assume that this plane is also quite overlapping information security, because these two are very similar. So I tried to look at specific controls that are information security, but not really cybersecurity. So shredding, for instance, is information security and not cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is about digital. It's about the cyber domain. People security, we can define it as non-cybersecurity, but I guess most people would say people security is definitely a part of cybersecurity, so let's leave it at that. I was trying to look at controls that are only cybersecurity related. So cyber intelligence, for one, is a control that I think most of the information security experts here or practitioners would agree we haven't done that. We haven't been doing cyber intelligence 5 years ago. If someone asked us, what is our situation? Has someone hacked into the organization? 5 years ago or 3 years ago, we would say, let's assume that someone is inside. Now, I think it's a good practice to say that, but that's not an answer. It's a guess. It's an estimate. It's a guesstimate. So only when you start using cyber intelligence properly, you start getting some answers to this question of whether someone is looking at us, whether someone was able to attack us. We look at darknet sources. We see if people are talking about our organization, if they were able to extract information. Okay, so there's one control. There are a few others, like SCADA. In information security, we weren't focusing on the protection of the system. We were focusing on the protection of the information. So SCADA is probably another, and we weren't looking at 0 days. So another one. But is that all what the difference between information security and cybersecurity? So then I looked at it from a different perspective. And I noticed that some of the controls that were in the overlap area of these two planes have changed between the past and today. Let's choose one. Incident response. 5 years ago, the best case scenario for incident response was a procedure on the shelf. People didn't allocate incident response teams. People did not train incident response teams. Today, people hire third-party services on an SLA basis, having incident response experts coming in after 4 hours. So there's a difference between the level of investment in the past and the level of investment today. So maybe that's a change that's happened. Maybe that's a difference. And you can see this difference in other controls. So is that enough? I don't know. It's part of the explanation. So moving on, I started looking at the evolution of the profession. So, doing information security for about 20 years allows me to have some certain of perspective. Back in the day, about 92, 93, 95, before the era of commercial internet connecting to our organization, the people who were in charge of security were the chief security officers. These are physical security people, mostly from intelligence or army background, actually. Then, about 95, we had the internet connecting to our organization. We started being worried about the security of our systems and our IT. And the chief security officer said, yeah, this is our responsibility, don't worry. We're taking over that. Very, very quickly, that decision was overturned because they didn't have any IT or technical knowledge back then, 20 years ago. So IT people took over this responsibility with no real process framework or process background. So it was just solving tactical problems using tactical technical tools. By the way, if you can remember, 96, 97, 98 were similar days to today. The papers were full of attacks. Those were viruses back then, and denial of service attacks back then. Today, it's organizations losing lots and lots of money, but the papers are full of that. And keep that in mind because it falls into the level of acceptance of top management of the problem, so I'll get to that. Of course, physical security stayed the same. After a while, we started going into the GRC era. We had SOCs coming in, we had audits coming in from clients, so there was a need to change the ownership of information security, and people like consultants or management people with process background came into play, and they took over the responsibility for information security. Of course, IT security was left as an operational function, and physical security stayed the same. And now we're in the cybersecurity era. Now what happened there? You remember those non-IT Army experts that were in charge of physical security? Well, they haven't been sitting quietly for the last 20 years. What they've done for the last 20 years, they have been working very hard to fill in the gaps, the technology gaps. Actually, today they have the real visibility and real knowledge of what cyber offense is. The Army people need cyber offense. What do they need it for? Primarily for intelligence. Army people do not wake up in the morning without intelligence. They do not do anything without intelligence. As opposed, by the way, to IT people, as we said before. So they needed ways to connect to systems, to connect to mobile networks, to collect data from the internet in order to understand what's going on in the enemy side. And in order to do so, they developed offensive tools. They developed very, very sophisticated tools like Stuxnet, for instance, slowing down centrifuges in a nuclear plant. So these are real offense capabilities. And they've been doing that for 20 years. And now they're getting out of the Army or these other organizations with lots of information about intelligence and about cyber offense. And some of them today already take the role of being responsible for cyber defense management, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Of course, all the rest is the same. Now, what you can see here, this evolution, is it carries something very, very sad. You know, over time, our profession, information security, became less and less a protection, an effective protection profession, and more a compliance-based profession. I can see my presentation. So anyway, yeah, here it is. So the compliance level rose because, you know, people ask us to be compliant. People don't really ask us to protect the assets. People ask us to be compliant with SOCs or other regulations, with clients' requirements, with management requirements. And you know, the era of cybersecurity is really about effective cyber defense and not about compliance. And this is exactly what the regulator says. Now, you know, before I go into what cyber defense is, let's take an example. You surely know this. In April 2013, there was a tweet that Obama got hurt in an attack on the White House. And look at what happened to the American Stock Exchange at 1:10 p.m. This is a severe reaction to something that is what? What is this? Is that something that information security people can take care of? I mean, it's not an attack on an information system. It's not an attack dealing with stealing information. if for any reason someone forges your CEO's Facebook account and puts something that is harmful on top of it, what are you doing? What would you do? 1-800-Zuckerberg? I mean, how do you contact Facebook? How do you remove that? So, what is cybersecurity? I think it falls into what this kind of things represents, this new era of requirement for our organization. Now, we're in ISACA, so you know ISACA CSX, ISACA is doing a lot of work in cyber and cybersecurity, and the cybersecurity fundamental course defines cybersecurity as opposed to information security, which is the usual, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. It defines it as anything intended to protect the enterprise, anything, from anything, like attacks, breaches, or any other consequence. So it's very, very, very broad. So let's talk about this Directive 361. Just before that, let me tell you that since 2003, we had heavy regulation about that deals with information security. It's called 357. They have a numbering system. And what it covers, it covers IT risk, it covers information security and other things. It requires the bank to establish a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, and deal with other basic aspects of information security. And we also have SOX. We also have Basel II for risk management. So what is 361? This is its official name. If you want to look it up, it's online in English. So cyber defense management, the areas of focus they provided are two. It heavily deals with cyber risk management, and it deals with this concept of cyber defense management. I'm going to talk about cyber risk management in a moment. Cyber defense management is really the shift from compliance security to effective security. And you can summarize it in 3 points. The mission of the person in charge has been redefined. We have to protect ourselves using attackers' point of view. And number 3 is we have to be resilient and build in resilience into our organization. Let's talk about these 3 for a moment. The regulation defines a new role. It's called CCDO, Chief Cyber Defense Officer. This is built into the regulation. In the beginning, they wanted it to be a different person than the Chief Information Security Officer. In the end, they gave up on that, but I think it was a good requirement. And as we saw, the Chief Information Security Officer deals with compliance and putting on a thin layer of security everywhere in the organization. The Chief Cyber Defense Officer is dealing with cyber defense and is in charge of cyber risk. And basically what his role is to identify where very, very bad things could happen to an organization in the cyber domain and protect against those. This is a different kind of protection using what we said, attack-based defense. So attack-based defense, we were talking about these army chaps with lots and lots of offensive knowledge. We have to use these offensive capabilities in order to understand how come we invest so much in information security and still we're being attacked successfully all the time. Information is stolen all the time. I don't need to put any infographics about breaches. We all know that. So what's going on here? I mean, we put on so much security and still attackers are very, very easily going into the organization. This is because hackers think differently than IT security people. And IT security people haven't been involved in understanding hackers' mentality, hackers' DNA, and the DNA of an attack. Let me give you an example. Say someone tells someone approaches the Chief Information Security Officer of one organization, asking him to perform an attack on the organization and take control over the organization. A Chief Information Security person would think about the nitty-gritty stuff of the technical domain and would ask us to perform this attack not using social engineering. Now, this is a very, very strange requirement. Why not use social engineering? So we asked him, and he says, because it will work. It will work. We know it will work.
Yeah.
So if it will work, let's go a layer deeper into the technology and make sure that we haven't overlooked any tiny bit hole in software, in mobile security or whatever. Now this is wrong thinking. We are allocating our budgets in not the most effective way. And what we should do is we should look at social engineering. We should look at the gaps that are created between physical security and logical security. For instance, we have a guy found a very easy way to exploit the readers on the wall. The door readers on the wall with an iPhone. So he opens up any door, and he opens up the computer's room door, and he gets the tapes. Now, the backup tapes. So is that information security or is that physical security? Why does it matter? I mean, there should be a function looking at all of that and making sure that there are no cracks between the different functions. And this is exactly what's going on here. The regulation points us into having a chief cyber defense officer that regulates and provides governance and advice to different functions within the organization. Business continuity people, physical security people, fraud people. Is cyber fraud not a cyber risk? It is.
Yeah.
So this is the way that the organization needs to think. And the third area was resilience. And this is something, it's a mentality thing. An organization needs to understand that it won't be 100% protected. And if it's not 100% protected, it means that at a certain point in time, we will have a cyber disaster. And once we do, we need to have very capable people making the right decisions, understanding what they're seeing, communicating with the press. This is all business continuity stuff, But it should be integrated into cyber defense as other functions. So cyber defense is also about resilience and business continuity. It's about monitoring, it's about incident management. And once again, monitoring is not enough in the target area. In the target situation, people saw the breach. They didn't understand what they saw, and they didn't make the right decisions. So there are some focus areas on the 361. I won't go into those too thoroughly, but generally it covers governance, covers risk management, which I'm going to talk about in a sec, and other control objectives. You have that on the slides. So what were the challenges? First of all, the biggest challenge we had was to manage the change. I mean, people are used to thinking and understanding information security in a certain way, and it's really hard to move their perspective and to make them understand that the world has changed dramatically. And we're talking about all of those. The top management people, the board of directors, the chief risk officer, and other people. Management and board of directors. The regulation specifically puts the responsibility on the shoulders of the board of directors and top management. Now, this is something that we can argue, and once again, I had another conversation with a colleague last night, arguing about the effectiveness of SOX, for instance, which points definitely to the direction of the top management responsibility. But you can play around with that. But still, having to discuss that in the boardroom, effectively discuss it, understand it, and take some responsibility, put some pressure on top management, which wasn't there before. They need to understand, which is, I think, something that they do understand. They need to understand that a crisis-level cyber scenario is not improbable. And this is something that has changed. 5 years ago, a chief information security officer walks into the CEO's chamber asking for budget to manage a risk that could create a crisis, that could erase the company, the CEO would say, what? We're not the NSA, we're just a hospital, we're just an insurance company, we're just a bank, leave us alone, make sure we're compliant, go away. 5 years ago, today, I don't think any manager would be in a position to say that they don't realize and accept the fact that a crisis level scenario could have this level of impact on an organization in the cyber domain. Implementing cyber defense, I'll just say, I touched upon what cyber defense is, and what's important is to make sure that once we do the changes, we don't lose information security. The information security functions are critical, and we build the next level of maturity, if you want to call it that, on top of those foundations. So we have to make sure that we don't lose those. And in order to do that, we have to focus on an effective organizational structure, and we have to focus really on how to define the Chief Cyber Defense Officer's role. Risk management. This is a very heavy subject. I don't know how many of you deal with risk management on a daily basis. It's a very interesting area. It looks very simple, but it isn't. And risk management, cyber risk management, what we found after thinking about it very, very closely is that there are no cyber risk. It's not a new category. Cyber risk is not a new category of risk. You don't have to redefine your risk categories in your Basel II category, risk categories. It's a risk that behaves just as other risks. Any risk such as fraud or business continuity or information security could be a risk that is not used using the cyber domain, or a risk that is used through the cyber domain. So cyber risks are actually, it's actually a property of a risk. It's not a risk category of its own, and this is very interesting to think about. So, to conclude, my time has run out anyway. They promised me to come on stage and kick me off. I'm trying that. So the conclusion would be, first of all, look at cyber regulations as they come out. This was the first, but there are going to be some more releases during the year and next year. Even in Ireland, I saw a paper from September by the Banks Authority. This wasn't the truth. I mean, make sure that you also read the criticism about the regulation. Not everyone agrees with what I just said. And the biggest challenges, as I said, are noted. I think the biggest challenge is risk management and manage the change. Thank you very, very much for today.